They laughed at it. My old worn-out notebook, the one I had kept hidden for decades. "Why do you still hold on to that, Dad?" My daughter sneered. "It's just a bunch of scribbles, nothing important." My son smirked and joined in. "Maybe you should throw it away before it becomes embarrassing." But they didn't know that notebook wasn't just memories or old notes. Inside those pages was the key to everything, the real plan for my inheritance, the future I had imagined for my family. And in their mocking, I realized something terrible. They didn't care about me or the family. They only cared about what they could grab. That day, everything changed. They pushed me to sign papers, property deeds and documents I barely understood, telling me it was just a formality, but my gut screamed at me that something was wrong. They wanted control, and they thought I was too old and weak to notice. I should have seen the signs earlier. The cold looks, the whispered conversations when I wasn't around, the way they talked over me like I was invisible. But nothing hurt more than the betrayal from the people I raised, the ones I trusted most. When the notebook went missing, I knew they had taken it. Inside were my secrets, my hopes, my legacy, and now it was their weapon. This is my story, the story of how my own son and daughter betrayed me over money, lies, and greed. How a hidden will and a secret property deed turned everything upside down, and how I fought back to take control of my family's future once more. If you think inheritance drama is just about money, think again. It's about respect, trust, and what happens when those things break. Stay with me, because what happens next will shock you. I'm a man in my late 60s now. Most people say I look younger than my age. Maybe it's the years of hard work and a stubborn spirit that keeps me going. But beneath the calm surface, there's been a storm growing inside my family for a while now. Let me introduce the main players in this story, my family. There's my son, Daniel, a man in his late 30s with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue. He always had a way of making you feel like you were either with him or against him. Then there's my daughter, Lisa, a few years younger than Daniel. She's smart and ambitious, but lately, that ambition seemed to have taken a dark turn. Both of them married, of course, Daniel's wife, Karen, and Lisa's husband, Mike. People I once trusted, but now even they feel like part of the problem. My lawyer, Mr. Harper, has been a steady figure in our lives for years. He helped me build and protect our family's wealth, and always reminded me to be careful, especially with family matters. And then there are my friends, longtime neighbors and old pals who often warned me about trusting too easily. I didn't want to believe them. I never thought my own blood would turn against me. Now about that notebook, it's old leather, bound and worn from years of being carried around. I've had it since I was a young man, long before I had a family. It holds my dreams, my plans, and most importantly, the true details of our inheritance. When I was younger, I filled it with notes about the house, the land, the businesses I built from nothing, and the plans I hoped my children would honor. For years, the notebook was my secret. I never showed it to anyone because I wanted to protect what I built. But little by little, my children found out about it. At first, they laughed it off, mocked me for clinging to old papers. "Why do you need that now?" Lisa would say, smirking. Daniel would shake his head and tell me it was a waste of time. But that notebook was my lifeline, proof of my hopes and warnings. And as the years went on, the way they looked at it and at me changed. The light in their eyes wasn't respect anymore. It was something darker. I wish I could tell you the moment everything went wrong was sudden. It wasn't. It crept in quietly like a slow poison until one day the laughter turned into something worse, demands, lies, and betrayal. And it all began with that notebook. I wasn't always a man with a family drama and inheritance battles. Once, I was just a young guy with nothing but big dreams and an empty pocket. I worked hard, long hours, tough jobs, and sometimes little sleep. Slowly, I built a life for my family, the house you hear about. It wasn't handed down. I bought it with sweat and sacrifice, the land around it. I bought piece by piece, making sure one day it would be a legacy for my children. Money wasn't everything, but it was important to me, not just for comfort, but for security, for my family's future. I wanted Daniel and Lisa to have a solid foundation, a place where they could build their own lives without the struggle I faced. From the very beginning, I told them stories about the house and the land, not just about the money or the value, but what it meant to me, family, memories, history. I wanted them to respect it, to cherish it, to understand that it was more than just property. It was a home. Friends and neighbors saw our family as close, knit. We had weekend barbecues, birthday parties, holidays filled with laughter. But beneath the smiles, cracks were forming. Quiet cracks I didn't notice at first. The kids grew up with different dreams than mine. Daniel wanted success in business, more money, more power. Lisa had big ambitions too. Sometimes it seemed like the house and the land were just obstacles to their goals. Karen and Mike, my children's spouses, played their roles too. They were always around, always polite, but sometimes I caught sideways glances, whispered conversations I wasn't invited to. I brushed it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Over the years, the family grew more distant. Simple things like Sunday dinners became rare. The old warmth faded, replaced by coldness I couldn't explain. I started to see how the children looked at me less like a father and more like an obstacle. But I still believed in the family. I thought love would hold us together. I thought respect would be enough. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first signs of trouble were small, almost easy to miss. It started with little things off. Hand remarks, dismissive looks, subtle changes in how my son and daughter treated me. I remember the first time Lisa openly mocked my notebook. She picked it up one evening when I left the room and flipped through it carelessly. "This old thing. Dad, you really think these scribbles mean anything?" Her laugh wasn't lighthearted. It was sharp, like a knife. Daniel wasn't far behind. One afternoon, I overheard him telling Karen that I was stuck in the past and too stubborn to see the bigger picture. They talked about the house and how they wanted to move forward, which I now realize was code for selling it or taking control without me. They began to pressure me. "Sign these papers." Lisa demanded one day. "It's just legal stuff, Dad. Don't make it complicated." Daniel nodded, his voice calm but firm. "You trust us, right? We want what's best for everyone." But it didn't feel right. I asked questions, but they brushed me off or changed the subject. The warmth and respect I once had were replaced with coldness and impatience. When I tried to bring up the notebook, they rolled their eyes or laughed. One afternoon, I found the notebook missing from my drawer. Panic hit me like a punch to the gut. I searched everywhere, but it was gone. That notebook was more than paper and ink. It was my last hold on the truth. When I asked Daniel and Lisa, they looked away or gave vague answers. Something was happening behind my back, and it scared me. The house that was supposed to be a family home felt like a trap. I was no longer the head of the family. I was being pushed aside. I realized then that this was more than just disrespect. This was betrayal, and it was only getting worse. It started with what they called a simple favor. Lisa showed up one afternoon with a folder full of papers, all official, looking and stamped. "Dad, we need you to sign these," she said, her voice sweet but firm. "It's just paperwork to make things easier with the house and land." I looked at the documents, but the legal jargon was confusing. I asked her to explain, but she dodged my questions, saying, "It's all standard stuff, nothing to worry about." Daniel was there too, nodding along. "We just want to make sure everything's clear. You'll still own the house, Dad. It's just to keep things organized." I wanted to believe them. After all, they were my children. But something about their tone didn't sit right with me. They seemed impatient, almost desperate. Still, I signed. I trusted them. I thought maybe I was just being overly cautious. But the moment the ink dried on those papers, everything changed. Suddenly, I found myself shut out of decisions. Calls I used to get went unanswered. Meetings I was invited to were suddenly closed. When I asked about the property, they gave vague answers or flat out ignored me. One evening, I confronted Lisa. "What did I just sign?" I asked, holding the papers. She smiled coldly. "You signed away some control, Dad, but don't worry. You'll still have a place to live. We're just making sure the future is secure." The future they spoke of wasn't mine. It was theirs, and I was losing grip fast. I realized then that the papers weren't just standard. They were a trap, but it wasn't too late. I had to find out the truth before it was too late. After signing those papers, I tried to get answers. But every time I asked, I was met with silence or half-truths. Daniel and Lisa had become experts at dodging questions, smiling when I pressed, changing the subject when I probed deeper. Karen and Mike joined in too, always quick with excuses or reassurances. "We're just trying to protect the family," Karen said once with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But the unease in my gut told me otherwise. I decided to dig deeper. I went back to Mr. Harper, my lawyer, the one I trusted. I explained the situation and showed him the papers I'd signed. He looked through them carefully, his face growing serious. "These documents, they don't just transfer control," he said slowly. "They give your children the right to manage and sell property without your approval. It's a major change." I felt like the floor dropped beneath me, but they said I would still own the house. "That's the lie," Mr. Harper said. They twisted the truth. I wanted to confront them, but I also knew I had to be careful. If they suspected I was onto them, they might disappear with everything, and then more lies surfaced. I overheard Karen talking on the phone about hiding the will and keeping Dad in the dark. Lisa told a neighbor that I was too forgetful to understand what was happening. It was all a game to them, a cruel game of control and greed. I felt trapped in my own home. The people I loved had become strangers, and the trust I gave them was weaponized against me. But there was one thing they didn't know. They hadn't found the notebook yet, and inside it I still had hope. That notebook was my last connection to the truth, the one piece of the past that still belonged to me. Every time I opened it, I felt strength. Inside were my handwritten notes, detailed plans for how my property was to be passed down, and personal messages I had hoped my children would read one day with respect. But one morning it was gone. I woke up feeling uneasy, but I thought maybe I misplaced it. I searched every drawer, every shelf, even the small box where I kept it hidden. Nothing. The notebook had vanished. Panic set in. I knew immediately they had taken it. I tried to ask Daniel and Lisa, but their answers were cold and distant. "Maybe you lost it, Dad," Lisa said, barely hiding a smirk. Daniel avoided my gaze, pretending he didn't hear me. Without the notebook, I felt blind. The last piece of my story was in someone else's hands. If they destroyed it or twisted its meaning, I might lose everything I had fought for. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the silence pressing down on me. I remembered the laughs, the dinners, the moments when the family was whole, and I wondered, when did it all fall apart? How did my children become the enemies I never saw coming? Yet, even in the darkness, I knew one thing: I wasn't done fighting. The notebook was gone, but the truth was still out there, and I would find it. Days passed in a haze of worry and sleepless nights. I kept replaying every conversation, every suspicious glance. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. A letter from Mr. Harper, my trusted lawyer. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was news I never expected. The letter revealed that many years ago, before any of the recent chaos, I had created a secret will. A will that not only named the rightful heirs, but also detailed a property deed that no one else knew about, hidden away for protection. I read and reread the words, my heart pounding. The letter said the will was safe in a secure place, only to be released under certain conditions. Conditions none of my children had met because they were acting behind my back. The secret will was my safeguard, my way of protecting the family from exactly what was happening now. But why hadn't anyone told me? Why hadn't Daniel or Lisa mentioned it? Or better yet, why had they hidden it? This letter was a lifeline, a chance to regain control, but it also meant one thing: the betrayal went deeper than I thought. Mr. Harper offered to help me access the will and explain the legal steps we could take. Hope stirred inside me for the first time in weeks, yet I knew the fight was far from over. I was about to uncover secrets that would shake my family to its core. With Mr. Harper's help, I finally got access to the secret will and the property deed tucked away safely in a lawyer's vault. As I unfolded the pages, a wave of emotions hit me: relief, anger, and disbelief all mixed together. The will was clear. The house and the land were legally mine to live on as long as I wished, and after me, the property was to be divided fairly between Daniel and Lisa. But there was a catch. A part of the estate was set aside for a charity close to my heart, something they had conveniently never mentioned. More importantly, the property deed revealed something that shook me to the core. The house was actually registered under Daniel's name alone. A fact I never knew. It explained a lot. The sudden push to get me to sign papers, the secretive conversations. Daniel had been controlling the property behind my back, manipulating the legal documents to put himself in charge. Lisa, meanwhile, seemed to be in on it, using her charm and cunning to keep me distracted and docile. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was legal, calculated, and cold. Reading the will and deed, I realized how cleverly they had planned this, hiding their true intentions while pretending to care for me. But now, I held the proof I needed. The scales of justice were finally balanced in my favor, but exposing the truth meant a confrontation was inevitable. Would my children accept the truth, or would they fight harder to keep what they had taken? I steeled myself for what was coming. I gathered the family in the living room one quiet evening. The tension was thick, heavier than I had ever felt before. Daniel and Lisa exchanged wary glances. Karen and Mike stood behind them, arms crossed like they were preparing for battle. I held the will and the deed in my hands, the weight of truth heavier than any paper could carry. I have something to show you. I began, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I laid the documents on the table and looked each of them in the eye. This, I said, is the secret will, and this, I pointed to the deed, shows who really owns the house. Daniel's face tightened. Lisa's smile vanished. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. You lied to me. I said quietly but firmly. You twisted the truth. You pushed me to sign papers that took away my rights, and you hid this from me. Lisa snapped. You don't understand. We did this for the family's future. For your future, I interrupted, not mine, not the family's. Daniel stood up, his voice raised. We did what was necessary. You're too old to manage these things. You're being stubborn. I shook my head. You've betrayed your own father. I trusted you. There was silence, heavy and suffocating. The people I raised, the people I loved, had become strangers. But I wasn't finished. This ends now. I'm taking back control, and anyone who can't respect that will face the consequences. Karen whispered something to Mike, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. They may have tried to steal my legacy, but I wasn't going down without a fight. The confrontation didn't bring peace, it shattered what little was left. The family split like cracked glass, each side sharp and dangerous. Friends and neighbors started choosing sides. Some whispered support for me, others sympathized with Daniel and Lisa, calling the whole thing just a family disagreement. But I knew it was more than that. It was betrayal wrapped in greed. Daniel stopped speaking to me altogether. Lisa's visits became cold and rare, and Karen and Mike kept their distance, avoiding any chance of being caught in the middle. Family dinners stopped. The house felt emptier, colder, a shell of the place I had dreamed it would be. Rumors spread fast. Some said I was being manipulated by outsiders. Others claimed I was trying to control too much. But the truth was simple. My children chose money over love. I tried to hold on to keep the family together, but every attempt was met with silence or anger. The people I thought I could trust turned their backs on me. And yet, through all the chaos, one thing became clear. I had to stand strong, not just for myself, but for what was right. The legal battle was brutal. Daniel and Lisa hired expensive lawyers, trying every trick to keep control of the house and property. They claimed I was unfit to manage my own affairs and pushed to have a trustee appointed to protect the estate, meaning themselves. But Mr. Harper stood by my side. He fought hard, gathering evidence, exposing the lies and forged documents. Slowly, the truth came out in court. How Daniel had secretly registered the house in his name. How Lisa had manipulated me into signing papers under false pretenses. The judge was firm. The court ruled that the secret will was valid and that my rights as the owner were protected. Daniel and Lisa lost the case, and the property was returned under my control. It was a victory, but a bitter one. The damage had been done. The family was fractured, trust broken beyond repair. Daniel and Lisa faced not only legal defeat, but also public shame among friends and neighbors. They had gambled everything on greed, and they lost. I felt a mix of sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the family I lost, relief that justice had been served. The people I once called my children had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. After the courtroom battles and family fractures, I felt like I was standing alone on a battlefield. But even in the darkest moments, I wasn't truly alone, Mr. Harper, my lawyer, became more than just legal help. He became a trusted ally, someone who reminded me that justice and truth still mattered. His steady presence helped me regain confidence when I felt crushed by betrayal. My old friends, neighbors who had known me for decades, showed up in ways I never expected. They called, dropped by with food, offered words of encouragement, and reminded me that family isn't always just about blood. Sometimes it's about who stands by you when everything falls apart. Even some of my children's spouses quietly reached out to me. I learned that not everyone was as caught up in greed as Daniel and Lisa. Those small gestures of kindness meant the world to me. I began to rebuild, not just my legal standing, but my life. I set new boundaries with the people who betrayed me. I learned to say no when I needed to. I learned to protect myself without bitterness, holding on to hope. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the loneliness felt unbearable. But slowly, peace began to return. Sometimes you lose people you love, but you find strength you never knew you had. And that strength carried me forward. After the dust settled, I found myself sitting quietly in the house I had fought so hard to keep. The silence was different now, no longer heavy with tension, but filled with a strange calm. It was as if the walls, once witnesses to betrayal and anger, were finally breathing a sigh of relief. I looked around and thought about everything that had happened. The laughter and love that once filled these rooms, the sharp words and cold betrayals that tried to tear it all apart. The pain was deep, the wounds raw, but I knew this calm was a sign of healing. The fight had taken so much from me, my trust, my family's unity, even parts of my own peace, but it had also given me something else: clarity. I saw who truly mattered and who didn't. I learned that strength doesn't always come from winning battles, but from surviving them. I started to rebuild my days around small moments: morning coffee by the window, calls with old friends, long walks on the land I'd protected for decades. I began to cherish what I still had, instead of mourning what was lost, and slowly the calm grew stronger, replacing the anger with acceptance. I realized that sometimes storms come to clear the air and make room for new beginnings. After the storm, I knew I couldn't just go back to how things were before. Too much had been broken. I had to rebuild not just my home, but my sense of peace and safety. That meant setting boundaries. It was hard at first, telling Daniel and Lisa I needed space, that certain topics were off limits, that I wouldn't be manipulated again. I stopped answering calls when they tried to guilt me. I declined invitations that felt like traps. At first, it felt lonely, but I reminded myself that peace isn't about having everyone around you. It's about having the right people. My true friends, Mr. Harper, and a few family members who stood by me became my new circle. I also took time to focus on myself, things I'd neglected for years. I started gardening again, something that grounded me. I picked up old hobbies, read books, and took long walks on the land I fought to keep. These small acts became my therapy. Rebuilding peace wasn't quick or easy. There were days filled with doubt and sadness, but every day I chose healing over bitterness. I learned to forgive not for them, but for me. Most importantly, I learned that respect can't be demanded. It has to be earned. And sometimes when respect is lost, it's okay to walk away. Looking back, the pain of betrayal still stings. It's a wound that never fully heals. But with time, I've come to understand that this story isn't just about what was lost. It's about what I found in the process. I found strength I didn't know I had. I found the courage to stand up when everything felt like it was falling apart. And I found clarity about what truly matters. Family isn't just about blood or property. It's about respect, trust, and kindness. Without those, even the closest ties can snap. My children's greed taught me a hard lesson. No matter how much you give, some people will only see what they can take. It's painful, but it's reality. But I also learned that life goes on. You can rebuild. You can find peace even after the worst storms. So here's my final word. The lesson I want to leave with you. Respect matters more than money, and now they know it too.